The flying over people regulation is already one of the most misunderstood regulations from the FAA. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the top 5 misconceptions about the flying over people regulation. Hello and welcome to LegalDrone, where we talk about drones and other tech stuff. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribe. Before we begin, as always, this is not legal advice. So the FAA issued the new regulations for flying over people, and this regulation came out at the same time when the remote ID regulation came into place. And what the FAA did is that they bound both regulations. So for the flying over people regulations, most of the things you will need remote ID, and for others you will not. But there's a lot of confusion because the FAA divided drones into 4 categories. Specifically, there are 3 categories that might concern regular drone users. Category 4 might be reserved for drones from different companies using them as a way or a means to deliver packages. But this was something that was going to come down eventually, because companies want to use drones for delivery, and in order to use drones for delivery, you might need to fly over people when moving from point A to point B. But without further ado, let's start with misconception number 1. So the first misconception is that you can now go and fly over people whenever you want, but that's not entirely true. In order to fly over people, you will need to have a drone that falls within one of the categories that the FAA issued. And if you go to the final ruling from the FAA, you will see that there are a lot of technical specifications and technical terms in that regulation. And as you would suspect, this is a regulation that is designed for manufacturers, because ultimately a drone manufacturer will get their drone approved by the FAA to be a category 2 or a category 3 drone. So every drone manufacturer will have to do tests in order to prove to the FAA, well, this drone doesn't cause lacerations, or the kinetic energy of the drone is, a particular number. This drone weighs some certain amount of pound. But you will get your drone if you are going to get a category 2 or 3 drone. That drone is going to be labeled as a category 2 or 3 drone. So if right now you have a Mavic Air 2S, you might not be able to fly over people yet, because that drone, it doesn't fall within any of the categories. So to the thought of you can go right now and fly over people whenever you want, well, it's not that simple, because you might not have a drone that falls within those categories. So if you want to know more about each category and the requirements, I'm going to put a link in the description of a video from Pilot Institute. They did a very good video. It's like a 30-minute videos. They do different tests. They explain the regulations. So I'm going to leave a link to that video so you can watch it after. So now we move on to the second misconception, and it was something that someone told me, oh, you're wrong about that. Well, in reality, it has to do with waivers. When it comes to waivers, people will say, oh, you no longer need a waiver to fly over people. Well, that's true if you have a drone that falls within the categories of the new regulation. But if you don't have a drone that falls with those regulations, then you might be able to get a waiver. And if you go to the regulation, the FAA, with the new flying over people rule, they amended the Part 107 set of rules and regulations that has to do with this particular topic. So one of the things that they amended was the list of regulations subject to waivers. Now, they didn't remove the flying over people regulation from that list, so that regulation is still subject to waivers. And they add another one that was operations over moving vehicles, and that particular one is section 107.145. So these rules are all subject to waivers. So When someone tells you you no longer need waivers, well, that's going to be true if your drone falls within the categories from the new set of rules. But if your drone doesn't follow within those regulations, then the only way that you might be able to fly over people, it's going to be with a waiver. Now we move on to misconception number 3. And misconception number 3 is that you don't need a Part 107 certificate in order to fly over people. Well, if you go to the new set of rules and regulations, these are under Part 107. So if you're going to fly over people following the categories from the flying over people rule, then you're going to be flying under Part 107 rules. So in order to fly under Part 107 rules, you will need a Part 107 certificate. So yes, you will need to have passed the Part 107 exam and have your certificate from the FAA in order to be able to fly over people under the new rule. So now we're going to move on to misconception number 4, and this has to do with the under 0.55 pounds drone. So if you have a drone that weighs less than 0.55 pounds, you might be able to have a category 1 drone already. So the question is, does the DJI mini drones fall within category 1? So one of the things that the new regulation has is that you cannot have exposed rotating parts that cause lacerations. And as a category 1 drone, you don't need FAA approval. How do you determine if you have an exposed rotating part that causes laceration? Then we have to do studies about that. The video that I mentioned earlier from Pilot Institute, they do a test using the DJI mini drone in order to see if it causes laceration. So like I said, I'm going to put a link in the description to that video so you can see that particular test and see if the drone does cause lacerations or not. They concluded that yes, indeed, the drone caused lacerations. So one thing that you might be able to do is to put on a propeller guards, but the thing is that if you put propeller guards in your drone, it's not going to fall within the weight limits from the category 1 drone at the moment of takeoff. So that is one of the top misconceptions here, because people think that their drone, their mini drone, does fall within the category 1 regulation, so they don't have any problem with that. But in the end, it might not classify as a category 1 drone, so we need to keep that in mind. So finally, we're going to talk about the 5th misconception, and that is about the type of flying that you can do with a drone under these regulations. So the FAA divides the types of flying over people into 2 categories. They have something that is called sustained flight, and they have something that is called transitioning flight. So transitioning flight is going to be very easy. So let's say that you are using your drone to take picture from a house, doing some real estate job. Then you have another job within the same place to get footage from another house. So if you have a category 1 drone, you will be able to go from point A to point B without landing your drone, and you might be able to fly over people during that transitioning flight. Now, the other type of flying is sustained flight. And sustained flight, well, it covers hovering. Sustained flight also covers if you are taking footage of an event and you are going back and forth in the same place. So with that motion, you will be flying over people at some instances. So it doesn't matter that you are going from point A to point B. If you are doing that type of motion repeatedly, then that's going to be classified also as a sustained flight. And the third type, the other type of sustained flight is, if you're circling using the same basis as, going back and forth with your drone. If you are circling around a group of people, that's going to be also sustained flight. Now, the thing is that if you are doing sustained flight over something that the FAA has called open air assemblies, then you will need remote ID regardless if you have a category 1 or category 2 drone. As a category 3, you will not be able to do sustained flight over open assembly, but with a category 1 or 2 drone you will be able to do that, but you will need remote ID. And at the moment I'm shooting this video, I don't know any drone that already has remote ID. At this moment, I don't think that you can do a sustained flight over an open assembly regardless the drone that you have. Then again, all this information, you can go to that video that I told you from Pilot Institute. It's a really great video. It's a lengthy video. It's like a 30-minute video, but it goes into detail with each and every one of the different categories and the different type of flying. I think that video really explains well these new regulations. So thank you for watching this video. If you like this video and you learned something from this video, please a like will help in the long way. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to see more drone law videos, you can click in the box here. And thanks again for watching, and see you next time.